Hi, this is Ms. Lavodi, and this is project option number 3, creating a digital portrait of a blend of pop art portrait styles. This is the outcome for this tutorial. Start by importing a color reference photo into Taisui Sketches Pro, and then we'll begin by layering on top of that. So this is my color reference photograph. I'm adding a layer over it, and I'm also dropping the opacity of the photo layer so I could see a little bit more clearly what I'm doing on top of it. So I actually like to start with the skin tone, and I kind of try to break the skin tone into like 3 or 4 different tones here. So we have like a light, then we have a warmer tone, we have a cooler tone, we might have a little bit of a pinkish tone in here, and I try to use these 3 different tones to create light and shadow. So I just kind of haphazardly plot them around with big chunky brush strokes, and then what I'll do is after this I will use the Tortillion or blending tool to smudge them together. So we have light, medium, dark values of the skin tone in these different shapes. So now we're doing the blending tool to smudge together the skin tone areas. So this looks something like this. Sort of softens the colors up. I start with smudging inside of the light areas and then a little bit of the dark areas, so that way I can push the color together. Here I'm going to add another layer for the lips, so that way I can keep the lips separate and nice and sharp looking. So I'm picking a color for the top and a color for the bottom lip, and then separating them with a black line to show some shadow. And I can add some highlights into the lip and then again soften that out with the blending tool. Now I'm going to add a layer on top of the skin tone, and this is where I'm going to trace the contour lines of the portrait with a more dynamic comic book style outline. I started with the acrylic brush tool, but this felt really rough and too textured. So you'll see as this progresses, I switch over to a different brush that is a little bit more smooth. So here I've switched to a different brush for a smoother line effect, and I want to use both thick and thin line for my outlining, so that way the portrait looks more engaging and dynamic. And it's okay to use a nice bold line in your portrait. So now I'm going to create another new layer for hair and clothing as needed, so I could fill them in with shapes of color. And I like to separate things as I'm coloring in stuff on different layers. It makes it so much easier to make corrections. So here's my new layer. I'm going to go into the flowers. So I'm using the pattern tool with the lasso, so that way I can go in and just trace a shape and it automatically fills it in with the color. If the color is set to a lower opacity, then when you overlap your shapes, where they meet will become a darker color. So this adds a little bit of depth to the painting. So here I've filled in the hair, that's all taken care of. Now I'm going to make another layer for the clothing and start to fill that in for the scarf area. And again, where the colors overlap, it creates a little bit more dimension and texture. And then here we have the final layer, which I'm dragging underneath all of the other layers. I want to make sure the reference photo layer is hidden completely. And I'm going to use a patterned background and fill the entire background in with that. You can choose to do something even a little bit more interesting if you want, but this is the final illustration.